Hi all. So I tried to film this video twice, actually. The second one I just finished doing, and at the end the footage came to around 36 minutes. And that is absolutely crazy, not to mention the amount of editing I would have to do. So I've decided to simplify this. I will say that these 10 films are not going to be including my picks for Ghibli or Pixar or live action Disney films. None of those. I'm going to be doing separate videos on those. This is strictly the traditional hand-drawn 2D animation. I am also not going to be going into the plots about these movies because the titles are pretty self-explanatory, and besides that, they're kids' movies. They're pretty predictable in their outcomes. And finally, instead of just going on about it, because I think that's what took up most of the time in these last two tries, I am just going to be naming 3 things that I like about them. So coming in at number 10, we have The Sword and the Stone, which came out in 1963. This is just one of these few Disneys that I just haven't gotten around to buying yet. The first reason is that love and romance is not a primarily focused on factor. Number 2, because it's hilarious. It uses slapstick, but not overly. It's a subtle humor. And number 3, because it's all about book learning and propelling the idea of brain over brawn. Coming in at number 9, we have Cinderella, which came out in 1950. I have the Diamond Edition and the Platinum Edition. Reason number 1 why I love it is because it's a really great story and very well told. Number 2, it is straight up beautiful. I mean, the backgrounds and the concept art by Mary Blair are just beautiful. And number 3, I love the story structure. Those moments of suspense and just with the mice trying to get the key up to Cinderella is very suspenseful, and I've heard Andreas Deja, famous animator, compare it to Hitchcock in terms of the suspense, and I quite agree with him. Coming in at number 8, it is a tie between 1940's Fantasia and 1999's Fantasia 2000. Look at how pretty! Reason number 1, I love that they both structured them the same way of having a short intro telling the audience what the piece of music was about and how the animators interpreted the story. Number 2, I love going back and forth between them and comparing the visual effects of that time of the early 1940s to what we can do, or well, I suppose it's a little different now, 15 years after it was made, but still, 1999, those CGI effects were pretty impressive. And number 3, the fact that there is no dialogue and that it is just a visual story that is carried forth by the music. I love it. Coming in at number 7, we have 101 Dalmatians, which came out in 1961. Reason number 1 is a little too complicated to explain, but basically up until that point, they were hand drawing and hand inking the entire film, and Walt wanted to find a cheaper way to do it because he had a lot on his plate at the time, and so they ended up using the Xerox process, which was a relatively new process. So they would just scan the drawing, and that was a cheaper way to do it, I guess. And as a result, this gave the films following that, up until they got like digital inking, so like in the 90s, it gave the films a totally different look. Number 2, I love that this is a contemporary film made to fit in that period of time, because up until then, the films are like fairy tales and they're based, whatever the time period was, like a couple or even several hundred years before. And number 3, I love the different facets of the story. It is action, it's adventure, it's also feel good, and it's just a beautiful looking piece of artwork too. I can see graphic designers at that time going crazy, because you've got the Dalmatian, which is the most stylized dog ever, and you've got Disney taking on this movie, which is crazy because of all those spots that they had to draw, statistics of how many spots each Dalmatian has. If you want to learn anything more about these, if you have these films, the behind the scenes look at how these films are made they're so informative. It's how I learned the bulk of my information about Disney stuff. Other stuff I had to go out on my own and find. But the fact that this comes with each of the movies is pretty cool. Coming in at number 6, we have a movie which came out in 2009, and it is The Princess and the Frog. The first reason that I love this is, no surprise, it is visually beautiful. Like, you've got the bayou, you've got these subtle lights, you have the fact that it's New Orleans, and you have these grand old southern houses. This movie I loved so much, I went to see it in theaters 3 times, no joke. Number 2, I absolutely love that Tiana is a working girl. She is on fire with her passion to become a cook and a restaurateur, and she's willing to work so hard to get it, and that is so inspiring that her first priority is not a man. It is her career and herself and how she can be the best she can be at what she is passionate about. And number 3, in terms of the romance, because it's also a very romantic movie, and I think they strike the balance between her wanting to be a restaurateur and the romance between her and Naveen. I think they have a great balance for that. And primarily that's because it's so contemporary in that it's not showing them fall in love simultaneously right away, like with so many Disney films before them, like where they fall in love with each other like instantly for no reason. They have conflict. They don't like each other for like the first 2/3 of the film, and they have to gradually, learn to accept each other. Coming in at number 5, well, this pretty much just had to be on this list. It is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. This came out in 1937, and it broke records because it was the first full-length animated feature film. This is my collector's diamond edition. It's pretty intense. Number 1 reason why I love it, well, because, like I said, it was the beginning. It paved the way for all that came afterwards. So if we didn't have this, we wouldn't have all the other Disney films that we know and love. Number 2, I love the artwork and the backgrounds. The backgrounds are watercolor gouache, and they're just stunning. And my number 3 reason, this is a personal note for me, it was either this or the first Land Before Time movie. That was the first movie that I ever remember seeing. I was either 2 or 3 years old, and I just have flashbacks of the first like opening credits of this and Land Before Time. I don't know which came first, obviously, but the fact that this is one of the first films that I ever saw puts it on this list. Coming in at number 4, we have 1991's Beauty and the Beast. This came out the year I was born, and it's so special to me. Number 1, you have this wonderfully structured and well-told story. Number 2, you have this heroine who doesn't want to go for the typical buff man that you'd think she's supposed to end up with because she's the most beautiful girl in the village. She wants adventure, and she finds that in her journey towards, well, first she's at the castle, and there's the mystery of that, and then the Beast becomes more of a figure in her life. But she doesn't need the Beast to feel whole and be a wonderful person already. And number 3, because she loves books. She's a very smart girl. Oh, and this movie, like the architecture. Oh! I know that was a very random topic change, but truly it's a very beautiful movie too. Coming in at number 3, we have probably the most romantic of all of these. It's 1955's Lady and the Tramp. Reason number 1, I love that it is a story about dogs and shown from their point of view. It's so great. Number 2, I love that it is set in this middle America time just before the war when everything was still happy and charming. Like you look in their bedrooms, it's very, I want to say Rockwellian. And number 3, you have this really kind of adult story occurring between these two characters. I've heard Andreas Deja compare it to a soap opera, and that is really kind of the case, but you can't help but fall in love with them all the same. Coming in at number 2, and this is always hard to come between this one and my number 1 pick. It's 1959's Sleeping Beauty. You heard me talking earlier about 101 Dalmatians and how it was a different animation process. This was the last hand-drawn, hand-inked, painted film. And it cost so much money to make. It was insane, the level of art and like the caliber of craftsmanship that they put into this thing. So number 1, I love the historical part of it, the fact that it takes place in this Gothic pre-Renaissance era. The fact of the ornateness at that time leads to reason number 2, which is the backgrounds are absolutely insane. You take a look at some of those backgrounds sometime, the amount of detail that went into them was, I believe it took 7 to 10 days for them to do one background, whereas in all the other films it was about a day or 2. Number 3, it is just the fact of the amount of effort they put into it. So just the fact that this was all done by hand and in so many different ink colors and tones, like the amount of time and effort that they put into it is just astounding. To make it look absolutely perfect in its detail, it's just so graphic. Like any frame from that entire movie, you could just put it on your wall as a piece of art. And finally, my number 1 pick, it might disappoint a few people because I've just heard like, oh, the typical jokes about it. It's 1942's Bambi. How do I pick just 3 things? Okay, number 1, the nostalgia for me. It gives you that feeling of being in the forest, and being in the forest for me, it's where I feel the most at home. And I know in the case of both my grandparents' houses, they lived like sort of out in the country, and so I would go out there and into the forest and I'd feel the most peaceful and be the most happy. Number 2, the backgrounds. They are impressionistic. It's totally the opposite of Sleeping Beauty because they didn't draw every single leaf individually. They did impressionism, and that was a gutsy move on their part. And it ended up looking fantastic with the animation. And third, I think it is the fact that there are less than 1,000 words of dialogue in the whole thing. So you are really relying completely on the visuals and the music. I suppose that makes it similar to Fantasia, but that carries you through both of them, the score and the backgrounds. It's just wonderful. And the fact that the story is all about life, death, and rebirth. It makes it probably among the most profound of the Disney films. It's romantic, it's whimsical, it's about the environment. So there you have it. That is my top 10 favorite Disney films of all time. I'm sure this video is different than what you would probably have expected it to be. I really struggled with filming this, actually. It was just so hard to decide what to talk about. I have yet to meet a Disney film that, like an animated film, that I really didn't like. So I guess I selected these top 10 mostly on their artistic merits alone and how much I enjoyed them overall. So let me know in the comments below what some of your favorite Disney movies are. I know this is a big topic for everyone, and they love to discuss and they love to gush about like the songs and everything. So thank you guys so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I shall see you soon with another video. Take care, everyone.